Thank you, Jay. Appreciate it.
Bye.
So we want to be respectful of your time, but we also knew we would run a little bit long. We've got two great speakers coming. So we've got Ted Schilowitz, who's the futurist at Paramount Pictures, and Ralph Rodriguez, who I describe as a serial entrepreneur, former ETMA board member, but he's got a lot to talk about as well. He sent me a deck that's also pretty thick. So let's get right to it if we can. And we're going to start with Ted. So hang on a second and I'm going to introduce Ted, but I think the best way to introduce him is to introduce him through his Hall of Fame speech or induction. So let's do that.
I've been in an entrepreneurial zone, an entrepreneurial life for a very long time. I was a production guy early on. I did a lot of children's television production in Florida. And then I migrated into the technology as it related to storytelling and visualization when I moved out to the West Coast.
5 years ago, we started on a project to build a digital movie camera that would be respectful to the logic and understanding of film. And that's what we did.
Yeah, these aren't just zombies. They're actually campers at Camp Red. They're here to learn how to shoot epics and red ones, and they're already out working and shooting. Close friend of mine at 20th Century Fox said, we want somebody to help us look at the future. And we think, because you've done this kind of stuff before, would you be willing to do that? I'd like to try a quick experiment with everybody. If you have one of these or something like it, take it out and hold it up. I'm predicting pretty close to 100% saturation. Hand them to the person next to you. Swap phones. Take those phones and put them in your pockets. You feeling a little nervous, a little uncomfortable? Ergonomics and comfort. The fact that I can flip it up to see you. Super lightweight, feels like glasses, looks like glasses. I'm looking at a super high resolution mixed reality world. What I've been doing is underwater virtual reality. The advantages of getting to be a futurist is you get to capture a virtual version of you. Someday this will be very commonplace. So now what I'm doing is actually scanning my living room. So what's pretty remarkable about this is that there's this robot creature that's floating in my field of view. And it actually looks real to me. And they're all over the place. They're literally coming out of the walls. What's the best that can happen to take risks? You help yourself. You help others. You help your family. You help your community. You help your country. You help the world. You make change. That's the best that can happen if you take a risk.
So pretty cool. Let me just share. Give me just a second to switch. So we're going to get into a little Q&A that I'm going to share with Ted, but just real quickly, a little bit about Ted. He is the futurist at Paramount Pictures. He works with studio leadership and the technology teams at Paramount, Viacom, CBS, and he's exploring forms, obviously, of new and emerging technologies with an emphasis on virtual and mixed reality. Okay, he was the Red Digital Cinema's first employee and an integral part of their product development team. The Red One and Epic cameras have had a significant impact on the motion picture industry. And he's presented, obviously, at numerous conferences. And that video clip that you saw was from his induction into the Variety Hall of Fame event and the Variety Innovation Award. So with that, you're probably wondering to yourself, okay, but what does that have to do with us? Well, actually, it's got quite a lot bit to do with us. Just this week, there was an interesting video in the Wall Street Journal titled, "The Future of Your Office is in a VR headset." So the point of that is Ted's area of expertise in virtual and mixed reality, I think, is very appropriate to talk about the future as well as the future of communications. And so, you know, I want to get into a little Q&A with Ted and open it up also to everybody else to ask questions as well. So first question for Ted, if I can, how does someone from New York who grew up in the backwaters of Florida end up becoming a futurist?
Good morning and or afternoon, everybody, depending on the time zone you're at. I'm actually on the East Coast. Can you guys all see me and hear me okay? Just making sure.
Yep.
Some thumbs up. Okay, good. Always good to check. Yeah, that little piece that you watch is kind of like a 4-minute version of my life, which in and of itself is a bit odd. But that's kind of an amalgamation of what I've been doing for the last 20 years. And the last 10 of it have been really pursuing this next generation of emerging technology. And when you ask that question about, you know, how does that muscle develop for someone that becomes this kind of entrepreneurial creature that has arguably had a couple of interesting success points along the way. It started really early with me when my parents and my brother and I moved when I was a very young kid to Central Florida from the New York area, with a small stop in a little town called Valdosta, Georgia, where my dad, who's a doctor, is a surgeon, was in the Air Force for a couple of years. And year one in Orlando in the, let's call it early 70s, was a pretty backwoods racist place. Year two, this interesting thing called Walt Disney World opened up, and I just got thrust into this world of change and openness and understanding and new conceptualization and risk-taking, and the idea that if this didn't work, we'll try again, we'll try something different. And it stuck with me from when I was a very, very young boy, and sort of guided me and has continued to sort of guide me through my life's journey. I don't know if you want to stop the screen share or not, so we can see each other bigger. But
we could do that, or what we could do, I wasn't sure whether you wanted to share any videos as we do this. So
we can, yeah, depending on, I mean, I can pull little
so
pieces. Yeah, if needed.
Yeah, so if you want, you know, you could take over with your screen. One question I wanted to throw at you as well is that this whole idea that, you know, thinking like a futurist shouldn't really be reserved for a select group of people, because we basically all need to plan and anticipate future trends. So what does a futurist really do, though?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are different kinds of futurists, and I sort of joke with my friends that I'm a futurist in training, as opposed to a real bona fide futurist. I tend to sort of have this moniker through my sort of life through the entertainment business, and then after retiring from these technology companies that I helped start and bring to life, my friends at the movie studios, first 20th Century Fox and now Paramount, said, "Come and help us figure out the future." And I didn't really quite understand what that was or what they wanted me to do. But every question I asked about, like, what exactly do you want me to do? They didn't really have an answer for, other than, you just go figure it out. We just need someone with our eyes and ears toward what might be happening next, because as very large organizations, and a lot of you in this field of studying enterprise business and technology and how it intersects, realize as you get larger as an organization, the last speaker was talking a little bit about IBM, which is a bit of a conundrum in many ways. You know, what's interesting is that Zoom is starting to approach the valuation of IBM. It may have overtaken it now, which is a little sort of terrifying when you think about what Zoom's actual offerings are versus what IBM's actual offerings are, right? But sort of getting back to the point of this, the idea of having someone at a very large, you know, 100+ year organization to just simply look at startup disruption, new technology, how it connects to new customer experiences, new ways that they're going to be absorbing and accessing content in various ways. It's an important role, albeit a bit of an undefined role. So there's no real job that I do other than just keep a lookout. And sort of, if you use the chess analogy, I'm moving 3 or 4 moves on the board past everybody else. Everyone else is looking at what is the next year of our life going to look like economically and physically, and with all the pandemic stuff and all the other economic forces that are challenging a business like ours in many ways. I actually, believe it or not, I'm not focused much on that at all. I'm focused on what does 2030 look like. So I look at the next 10 years of the trajectory of technology, entertainment, and creativity, and where we are potentially going to land. It doesn't mean I'm going to always get it right. It just means I'll probably get it more right than people that aren't studying it all day long. And that's what I do. I study it all day long. I use, you know, wacky sort of early stage devices like this and their various brethren all day long to start to understand what might be happening with the next stage of visualization, the next stage of collaboration, the next stage of consumerization of what we call a screen and how that's going to evolve over time. So at the end of the day, I'm really an explorer. I just am constantly exploring and learning and meeting with different people and organizations and testing technologies. I have a number of labs now. My labs are all in my homes because we took everything out of the studio now because everything is all closed down on that front. But I still have the same tech that I would at the studio. I just brought it all home. So that's my life in a nutshell.
Tell us about, you know, I had the pleasure of talking to you before to prep for this panel, for this discussion, and watch some of your videos. And one of the things that you refer to is this idea of the evolution of the screen and this idea of a digital metaphor on how everything is TV now.
Yeah. Let me see if I open up this keynote. I'll show you that. I think it might be in here. Let's see if we can do that quickly. If not, I'll let it open in the background. So yeah, as you refer to it, I have this fairly firm belief. Let me see if I can find the right slide that you're referring to in terms of the everything is TV. It's in here somewhere. Well, at any rate, I'll find it in a minute. The point of it all is that as we look at all the media that we consume and how we consume it, as well as the work product we consume, the way we communicate, the way we socialize, it all lives on this rectangular thing we call a TV screen. And if you look at every industry, your last speaker was referring to it too in a different vein. If you look at every industry, and the industries and the companies that have grown the most over the last 10 years, it's the companies, and really the last 30 years, but let's just use the last 10 years as an example. It's the companies that realized that everything would have some connection to this TV-like screen. So when we do the thing we often do most these days, send a mail to somebody, we do an electronic TV version of that, right? We just do TV mail, that's email. We do it on a little TV like this, or on a TV that you're all looking at right now on your laptop screen or a home computer screen or a tablet, right? When you shop, which is one of the biggest economic forces in the world now, if you look at Amazon, we essentially, that's TV shopping. So for everybody that made fun of the home shopping network, Amazon is one of the most successful companies on planet Earth, and it's effectively the evolution of the home shopping network, where instead of a old-fashioned Curtis Mathes TV and your grandma buying ceramic cats, we buy everything on the planet through a television metaphor now, right? And every other retailer on planet Earth is struggling because of the force, the mighty force of someone that really figured out the best possible chemistry. of how to TVize shopping. Now, others have done it. eBay did it. Walmart did it to a certain extent, but they didn't really figure out how to capitalize on it. Amazon figured out, and Alibaba and a few others figured out how to capitalize on it. If you look at by far the most successful companies on planet Earth now, they all have one thing in common. They've all figured out how to create a digital connective tissue to things that used to live in the physical world. Bar none. Microsoft, Apple, Google, Alibaba, Tencent, Amazon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The most successful, most profitable companies on planet Earth now, by far, have figured out the digital metaphor. And what's intriguing from my standpoint, from a lot of my brethren that work in the entertainment business, is we all work for large organizations that have owned the TV landscape for generations, right? The parent company I work for is Viacom CBS, giant television broadcaster. And there's ABC, and there's NBC, right? And then there's Fox. And you open this question up as, if those guys understood TV so well, how did they completely and totally miss the revolution of what was going to happen to TV? That TV would become this interactive conduit. We're doing it right now. We're all on TV. We're all watching TV in some way, shape, or form, right? Everybody on planet Earth is a TV star now, which is sort of an odd thing to think about. And it just took a generation to make that happen, right? Billions and billions of people are just on TV all the time. So how did the TV companies miss that opportunity, right? It's because they couldn't study it like a startup. So what I do is kind of exist in this little startup bubble inside these large organizations to make people realize you're gonna miss it. If you don't understand how to take risks, cannibalize yourself, and effectively eat your young, you're gonna miss it. That's sort of the essence of that.
Fascinating. And so what do you think of this idea of the future of your office is in virtual reality, in a virtual reality headset?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first stages of this have been accelerated mightily by the pandemic, and there are now stories abound about very large companies, albeit the more modern ones, that are effectively telling their employees that they never have to go back to the office unless you work in an engineering field or a physical thing or manufacturing or something where you have to be in the office. That your home, if you do anything that is related to typing for a living, communicating like this for a living, non-physical properties of work, you can just work from home. One of the biggest companies on planet Earth that just did this across the board is Microsoft, right? They basically said, for 95% of our employees, they don't ever have to come back to the office if they don't want to. Now, think about what a sea change that is. Like, I don't know for the people that are on this recording, how many have been to Redmond, but it is Microsoft world when you go to Redmond. There is so much office space, right? Spread all around Redmond. And by the way, all over the world. Like, I've been to giant Microsoft offices in Thailand, in China, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in Russia. They're everywhere, right? Physical real estate. So what happens to all that real estate when no one has to go to the office anymore? When we figured out that the technology has become so sophisticated that we can do almost everything we used to do in a physical office space from a home office space or a mobile office space. It's become a giant economic force that is just starting to be recognized. So I have this weird sort of instinct that what's going to happen with commercial real estate over the next 25 years is almost all commercial, purely commercial real estate is going to turn into some modified live workspace. They're going to basically turn it into lofts. They're going to turn it into new modern, like, you know, these high rises used to be in the middle of Manhattan, in the middle of Los Angeles, in the middle of Orlando, in the middle of Miami, wherever it is. And if it was just a commercial only business, it will probably not be a commercial only business in the future. It will be some sort of modified live work use case. That's seems like the only way out for real estate agents, but you know, and real estate owners. I could be wrong, but that's one of my futurist predictions. So you could check that one off if you want.
I think we'll actually unpack that a little bit later on today when we get into new business opportunities as clients return to the office, because we actually have somebody in the commercial real estate field who's going to talk to those sort of trends and I think hit on a lot of what you're talking about. I suspect with the pandemic, it's only become far more accelerated, and we're not going to have to wait long at all for this. So, you know, just as we start to wrap this up, you know, where do you see virtual reality affecting how do you see it impacting the future of communications and, on just different levels? Because you have a better feeling than most people about the limitations of it today and how it's improving and its pace of improvement.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing to discuss and think about. As you start to look at the collaborative tools we use today and all these like 12 video chat clients that essentially do the same things, except the buttons are all in the different place. So like I use 6 or 7 a day between Zoom and Skype and Microsoft Teams and Google Hangout, and they're all the same, and and Apple FaceTime, except you got to remember where all the buttons are each time, right? So there's like this extra step each time. They're all still very, very much locked into the metaphor of the past of what a screen is, which is this thing that has a border and we know where it is. The next screens for mixed reality and virtual reality are screens that actually track with where your eyes and your body moves and looks. So they're much more like your visual and limbic system of your body itself. That's why we call it virtual reality. It knows where you're looking and it will draw the screen as if I was just looking to my eyes over there, and it draws what it's supposed to see. And now I look here and it draws what it's supposed to see. The screen doesn't do that, right? The screen, as I move away from it, it's still there and I come back to it. The new forms of screens are offering new ways to what we call spatially collaborate remotely. So for things that we want to do in a more physical space together, and there's already a term we call Zoom exhaustion, right? Looking at all these little boxes, these little Brady Bunch boxes, after a while, it starts to actually tax your brain. You want to actually have a more intimate relationship with the people that you're talking with, and you actually sometimes want to share physical objects. You want to have much more of a connection to their visual system and their body system. And we can actually do that today in virtual reality and mixed reality. There's a number of pieces of software that I use on a regular basis that are pushing the boundaries. And this isn't all that experimental. These are things you can buy. You can buy these hardware for a few $100s now. It's not thousands of dollars. Most of the software is free or next to free to use, very similar to this kind of technology. And we can essentially bring people together in a physical space without them actually being in the same physical space together, which in and of itself is pretty interesting as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, that's definitely...
I can share this. I'll show you a little. This is a recording through. Let's see if this works. Yeah, I'll show you this little thing here. Let's see, tell me if this is all working now. It says I'm sharing my screen. Are you guys seeing that?
Yep, we can see that, Ted.
Comes up. So if I just play this, this is actually recorded through a mixed reality device that I'm wearing. There are 3 people involved. There's someone wearing a mixed reality device, that's me, and another person that's wearing a different kind of mixed reality device, and another friend that's wearing a virtual reality device. So if I play this, you'll get a sense of it.
Recording. Okay, I'm now recording. So there's my friend Bree, who works for Spatial, and there's my buddy Elliot, who works for Well Played. And the 3 of us are all spatially inside a collaboration environment. So Bree, since you work for Spatial, maybe you want to give a little 30-second intro about what we're doing.
Sure, absolutely. So Spatial is an augmented and virtual reality platform for collaboration. So of course we are all in different locations, and we can hang out, meet, collaborate around really any topic.
So that's one point of view. Here's another point of view from the other headset.
And what's happening is, as you're doing that, I'm walking around what you're doing as if this would really be in the real world. So way different than a video chat or some sort of web application. I'm literally seeing the backpack as a 3D object. I'm walking up close to it. I'm backing up to see your relation to it. I was watching you annotate. You're basically duplicating what we would do if we were actually in a showroom demo trying to figure out how to market and sell this backpack.
Right, I could even, make it, let's see, that's about me sized. Go here and try it on.
And try it on.
And it's still. Right. So I'm gonna pin this 3D model and then I'll walk up to it and I'll try it on. Is that about right?
Yep, that's it. You got it.
So you start to get a sense, and I've got lots more examples of this, but you start to get a sense of what could be done and how the future of what we do today is starting to map to a newer, more evolved type of screen that is just starting to scratch the surface on what we might be able to do with it. And there are 4 or 5 different applications I use on a pretty regular basis to do this. So while a good portion of my life is on these traditional screens doing these kind of speeches and interviews all over the world, another good portion of my life is I've kind of left all this behind. This is the past. This is not the future. The future is a new kind of screen that is maybe as dramatic as the move from color television, from black and white color to color television. It's that dramatic. It's actually maybe more dramatic.
And when you use these, just to bring it back to this audience, do you use it over the internet? I mean, what sort of data consumption is it expensive? You know, not so much the hardware, but the monthly cost for your data usage and everything.
Yeah, the data consumption is pretty much the same as if you were, like, you can do this on a normal high-end, cable modem, Spectrum or Fios style. Like, it's not that exotic. You probably couldn't really successfully do it off a 4G connection. You could, but it's a little clunky. I've done it. You absolutely can do it on an ultra wideband 5G connection, no problem. And you can absolutely do this on home internet without issue. That's what I do. I mean, basically, I'm just wearing those headsets and using my home internet connection, which is like a 200 down, 60 up kind of. It's not like you need gig speed to do it.
So let me open it up.
Hey, Joe, is it okay to ask a question?
Yeah, let me open it up to questions. Absolutely.
Okay. So, hi, Ted. This is really interesting. One of the questions I had, and, I've done some research on this, VR is, I think one of the biggest complaints is the headsets and the nausea and how long you can do that, and then you look at something like Facebook and their 3D photos. To me, that seems like a more plausible way to bring some realism into, things like Zoom meetings or virtual conferences. Have you seen any advances in that, going to what you were talking about, depth perception and being able to move? And, it's essentially, I mean, it's not rocket science. It's 2 pictures, right? Blended together. But just wanted to kind of get your thought on that. And if you see any communications companies kind of moving to that, where you don't need an awkward headset or an avatar, but it's actually more like a window into somewhere else.
Yes, so you're touching on an interesting sort of area of the pursuit of this, and you're absolutely right. The wearable style of this is just one part of the pursuit. It's got a lot of heat around it. It's got a lot of potential business growth around it. And there are obviously very, very large, very well-heeled companies that are investing billions and billions of dollars to see if they can capture this next compute and screen environment, right? So that's a given, we know that. But there's also this understanding of how far can we push our traditional screen technology? And there are another number of companies, as the screens that we use become high res enough to actually split them apart and make them 2 offset images. There's a few companies that are actually, and I test these, and I have a couple of these devices. They start at 8K screens. They can even move up to 16K screens, which are extraordinarily exotic. But 8K screens, believe it or not, are starting to become fairly pedestrian. I wouldn't say they're consumer yet, but they're starting to get there. Give it another 5 to 7 years and they will be just as consumer as whatever you're looking at right now. When you get that high a resolution of a device in front of you, you can actually split the image and reassemble it. And you can actually build a touch screen that allows you to manipulate objects in space in front of you without wearing anything on your face that actually feel like they're floating, kind of like the Princess Leia hologram. I'm actually involved in a number of companies, a number of startups that are using this technology for capturing people, for capturing objects. I'm an investor in this kind of stuff. I sort of dance the dance. So while the headset part of it, I would say, has the most heat and the most interest from these large companies, there are a lot of applications for the sort of non-headset version of this that we're starting to use on a regular basis as well. So you're absolutely right.
Well, think of a windowless room, right? If you're able to put a screen in there with a picture of the outdoors, but if you also think about it for teleconferencing, to feel like you're actually in a room, it's just seems like something that would not be overly hard to achieve from a technical perspective, but I don't see anyone really pursuing it. Or
what's interesting is it's not hard to achieve. It's hard to achieve well. It's very, very difficult to achieve that sense of realism and the believability when you're still sort of fighting for scale and you're fighting for market traction. So we're testing these things that are way outside of the consumer realm, right? They live in the DoD world. They live in the, in like heavy industry world to use these things. And that's all very real. Like there are a lot of labs that have exactly what you're talking about, completely viable. All the automotive companies use this for visualization. It's all real. It's not very well exposed because they kind of like to keep it all hidden, right? They don't want, because they don't want their competitors to sort of catch up to them. But they're all using sort of one version of this. It hasn't really gotten to the mass consumer sense because of the difficulty of scaling it down. But that will happen over time. What has happened is these head-mounted displays are on a fast track to evolution. So like just since I started really getting involved in this in the, call it 2013, 2014 timeframe, in 5 years, we've seen 5 full turns of the technology to the point where now you can buy a $300 headset that is more capable than a $5,000 headset from just 2 or 3 years ago. And it's lighter, it's higher resolution, it's better in so many ways, and it's starting to be a consumer device that you could use to do all of those things that you wanted to do, but you still have to be prepared to make that leap to something new, right? To actually wearing something on your face, which isn't a short-term thing. So like all of the dynamics around why hasn't VR become this like completely mainstream technology? Well, believe it or not, it has. It's just going to take 20 to 25 years until it's ubiquitous as television, because you actually have to ask people to make a change in their behavioral daily lifestyles, right? And if you look at what it took to turn a TV we put on our desk to a TV we hold on our hands, it didn't just take a year to get to this. It took arguably 10 to 15 years to get to the evolution of a device like this, right? So these things take way longer to adopt and then become the mass market successes, the multi-trillion-dollar businesses that they are now. It doesn't just take a year. It takes many, many years to do this, to find its way. So I'm on the kind of find its way path part of this thing, and continue to evangelize and say, this is coming. It won't look anything like it looks like today. Like the first cell phone you had versus this cell phone look fundamentally different, right? And if you were as early as I was, the first cell phone you had was in a bag that was as big as a shoebox, right? And it certainly wasn't a pocket computer. This is a pocket computer. It does everything, right? So,
Ted. Hi, Ted. It's Natasha. How are you?
Good.
Nice to see you.
You too.
So, Ted, when we met a couple years ago at IoT World, you said something really thought-provoking to me. You said, even though you feel that you have a small business, you can't afford not to think like you and your team do, which is, how do you put yourself out of business?
Right.
So there's a lot of entrepreneurs on this call, a lot of CEOs and owners of organizations, some small, medium, some folks are with very large carriers, but from that perspective, can you kind of tell us, what has been your journey with that, and some gems of wisdom around that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that probably, just from a timing perspective, is a good last question, because unfortunately I have to go on to a big Viacom meeting right now that will be on Zoom as well. So the self-cannibalization concept is sometimes an interesting one to grasp, but it's the basic understanding that if you don't figure out how to disrupt yourself, someone will figure out how to disrupt you. One of the most overt examples is Netflix versus Blockbuster, right? Which we could spend a whole hour talking about that. And the study of, there were periods of time where part of the board at Blockbuster really wanted to buy Netflix, and the other part of the board was like, it's too expensive already, and they could have bought it for $300, $400 million. Like, who's going to spend that much money on an acquisition? We can just do this ourselves. Well, I think you know the end of that story, right? And there are many, many, many stories like that, both teeny startup stories, medium-sized business stories, large business stories, right? It just goes on and on and on. So the idea of, regardless of the size of your business, if you're just a 1 or 2 person operation, one of those people should be somewhat tasked with figuring out, if you have a successful business, how to make your next successful business, and what tools and what evolution you have to do. If you're a medium-sized business, call it 50 to 100 people, right, with whatever market cap that would be, you should have 2 or 3 people, and you should probably be dedicating 5 to 7% of your time and resources and money in figuring out how to close down the business you have now. Because if you're not doing it, someone's going to do it for you. And if you're a gigantic business, like we are, 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 employees, my opinion is you should be dedicating 10 to 15% of your human capital energy and your financing to figuring out how to disrupt yourself. And if you don't do it, someone else is going to come in and do it for you. So that's my opinion.
That was
Love it.
fantastic, Ted.
Thank you.
Really love that final point. I think that is, Natasha, great question to ask. And that really, I mean, that encapsulates both the theme of this conference as well as the message that we wanted to get from this segment, which is this idea of future-proofing your business. So Ted, again, thank you so much. Sorry, we're running a little bit late, but
All good. Now
yeah,
it's
your
actually
call,
perfect
and-
timing because now I have to go on and actually do what we just talked about in practice. I have to
I
yell at
love
these
it.
people that are way above my pay grade that they're missing it. Like you guys you're literally missing it right now. And that's literally the discussion I'm going to have right now on a certain topic that we're working on. So there you go.
We'd love to be a fly on the wall, but okay, thanks, Ted.
My
Take
pleasure.
care.
Nice to see you
Thank you
guys.
very
Stay
much.
healthy.
Thanks for having me. Bye.